is supported by the Judith Neilson Institute for Journalism and Ideas and the Community Broadcasting Foundation, cbf.org.au.
And welcome everybody to Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd, whether you're listening live on Triple H 100.1 FM or via podcast. Here's the show where you learn from experts, be inspired by journeys and discover more about making your small business a success. I'm Alexi Boyd, broadcaster, advocate and small business owner. JobKeeper, 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 JobKeeper. JK. Stimulus, handout. No matter how you describe it, it's been a great illustration that we are actually living in the lucky country. Where else in the world has government been able to with one piece of legislation, simultaneously prop up the economy, maintain employee-employer relationships, keep businesses alive and flush cash back into the broader economy? But is it all good news? Is it fair? Is it equitable? And what about those businesses we know are just being plain dodgy? And another question, was COVID a missed opportunity where businesses who were on the way out should have actually folded? Joining us this week is financial frontline worker Nicole Lynch from Streamline Management, who is now, like many other BAS agents, a JobKeeper ninja. In just a few months, these financial experts have navigated the JobKeeper legislation, often compared in its complexity to the GST, which took months to roll out, and guided their small business clients through this minefield with finesse, expertise, and just a little bit of hand-holding. Welcome to the program, Nicole.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. We have been business colleagues for so many years now, and it's lovely to have you. I'm sorry to dump you in it because I'm asking you potentially one of the most complex questions that we have been faced with as financial advisors, which bookkeepers and BAS agents indeed are. We work with businesses on a real day-to-day level. What's been your experience with JobKeeper in general with your clientele? Is it helpful? Has it kept them open? Should they have shut?
D, all of the above. Maybe one or two probably should have taken the opportunity to shut, but they decided to plough on through. Some of them felt that they should be entitled to it even though they didn't meet the tests, and they maybe wanted to pull a Swiftie to get in. And others really were deserving and were entitled to it.
Exactly, and needed it to kind of remain, or just to stay alive, because we're in the most unusual of conditions. So let's talk through, just in case anybody's listening who is going, what's JobKeeper? and runs a business in this country. Unlikely. But it's what's been the purpose of it from the beginning?
The purpose, well, I'm imagining, this is just a personal opinion, is to keep people off the unemployment lists, to keep the statistics more palatable. And it makes small business owners, I guess, Centrelink workers, in that they're doling out all of the money that the government would have had to do otherwise. So the small businesses are in charge of all of the paperwork, and there's a lot.
There is indeed. It's not unlike BASs or self-assessments with TPAs and all those sort of things. Is it really another administrative burden to small businesses to have to register and get the paperwork? And is that your opinion?
Absolutely. There's a lot of work involved and a lot of risks for small business. If they enrol and they're not entitled, do they have to pay that back? Can they claw it back from the staff? It's quite risky for small business that don't know what they're doing, and no one really knows because it's been rushed out so fast. It was really hard to get your head around it. There wasn't time to stop and think really how it was going to work. And
in terms of the broader economy, do you believe that it's been successful to keep money pumping back into the economy and keep people connected with jobs?
Yes, and well, I guess yes. People have been spending. The statistics, I think, are showing that alcohol sales are up, gambling is up.
Excellent.
So maybe it's not great where it's being spent, but it is rushing out of people's pockets. So I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, it's good because when we think of those things, we don't necessarily think of them as positive, but in many cases they are small businesses, and those types of businesses need to be kept up, propped up as well. Plus, people need to eat. I mean, God, look at the rest of the nations in the world who don't have these sort of stimuluses and ways of keeping people connected with their jobs, and they're just all losing jobs and they're all on the unemployment lines.
On the flip side, though, some small businesses might have seen it as an opportunity to rehash their staffing levels. Maybe some people weren't really fit for the role, and this could have been an opportunity to gracefully let them go. I mean, horrible for the worker, but there are other safety nets available at the moment. So if you do have to let someone go, maybe it's a a good time to at least think about it. But people have been keeping those people on because they're entitled to JobKeeper for them. And so they've been sort of artificially keeping not great workers, I think, as well. There's a little bit of that.
So let's talk about the transition between 1.0, which is now what it's become because we've got this rehash, into 2.0. So what are some of the basics around 2.0? What do we know so far? Because, of course, it hasn't been legislated.
So we know very little. What we think we know at the moment is that it will be on a quarterly basis. So the whole July to September quarter, you have to have a 30% downturn compared to July-September in 2019. But we don't know if it will be based on a cash basis, so the money that hits your bank account, or if it will be on accrual, that's the invoices that you issue. We don't know yet. We don't know if we'll be allowed to choose or it will be forced on us that it's the same method that we report on our BAS. These things we don't know. And so I guess it's really too early to know if you're going to be eligible for JobKeeper 2.0, one, that it's not legislated, and two, that the whole quarter is not finished yet. So it's going to be hard to know what your actual sales are for the whole July to September quarter when we're now only on the 1st of September.
Do we know what the downturn figure is that you need to be, I don't want to say aiming for, but what is that downturn figure?
Well, this is a small business program. So for small businesses, it's 30% downturn of turnover. And sales, but that doesn't count other JobKeeper stimulus or cash flow boost. That's not included in your turnover.
So when you're calculating it, you don't add in those amounts you were getting from the state government or from the federal government or other JobKeeper payments that you've already received?
Correct. You specifically exclude those.
Okay, so I always get confused by that. What do they mean by the GST turnover? It's such a weird figure that a small business owner is not really going to understand what that means. What is it?
It's not BAS excluded items. So you have to have a supply. You have to be giving something or selling something or a service. And so the JobKeeper and the other stimuluses, you're not doing anything, you're not supplying anything, and that's why they are excluded. Right.
So you putting money into your account because you're trying to prop up those figures, for example, is not because it's BAS excluded because you're putting money in. So your own funds, that does not. That's why they have that word GST turnover in there because it's what you've got. Yeah. But what if you don't charge GST?
It's still the same principle. It's what you would report at G1 on your BAS.
Oh.
So normal sales type turnover. But that might also include the sale of an asset. So if you're selling your car to buy a new one, that would potentially be G1, so that would be reportable.
And that's one of the details that we're waiting on. We're waiting on to hear that from the parliamentary decisions or the detail people.
We're waiting on a whole lot of stuff. But those are general principles. That's the thing that you would normally report on your BAS, and so that would theoretically be included.
Excellent. Okay. So I had 10 employees that were included in JobKeeper 1. Can I assume that all 10, if I am eligible for 2.0, are they all definitely going to get 2.0 JobKeeper as well?
We would assume that without any details.
Could we just stop everything? Because we haven't done our disclaimer. Oh, wait. Everyone just stop. Can you all rewind to the beginning of the program and just listen to the disclaimer?
This is generic info. We're just some friends having a little chat over the table here. You absolutely need to speak to your BAS or tax agent about this. Those are the only two people that can help you with JobKeeper. Anyone else that's assisting you is doing it illegally, and you're an idiot if you let them help you.
Okay, fast forward back to where we were in the conversation. Excellent. Okay, so I've got my 10 employees. They were fine for 1.0, and now we've got 2.0, and I am eligible once we figure out what the eligibility is by definition. So I think they're all going to get it?
I would think so too. There were two. Initially the test was, were they employed on the 1st of March 2020? And as a casual, had they served 12 months with you of regular casual work? So had they started on or before the 1st of March 2019? That was the initial test. And then they just changed the date in JobKeeper 1.2 to the 1st of July. Were they employed on the 1st of July, or had they served 12 months as a casual up until the 1st of July?
And so recently we could add people that were employed up till the 1st of July under those similar conditions.
Correct. And the trap for young players on that one is the one-in, all-in rule. So if you had employees that suddenly became eligible because the test was changed to the 1st of July, you have to offer JobKeeper to them, or you're falling foul of the rules because you have to offer it to all of your eligible employees. You can't choose which ones you want to pay it to and then not pay it to others.
And that's a bit of a difficulty for cash flow because we've just been through August, which had three fortnights in it of $1,500 each, which you're going to be reimbursed for. Were those 1 July new employees, let's call them, from 1.2 version JobKeeper, were they getting all of those fortnights?
No. In the fine print, they became eligible on the 3rd of August. The first fortnight ended on the 2nd of August, and then the second fortnight for August started on the 3rd. So those employees are only entitled to 2 fortnights. So today, maybe you're going in to make your lodgement. In the next 14 days, you'll be making your lodgement for the month of August. And so any employees that have already been in will get 3 fortnights, so that's 4,500. Any employees that became eligible under version 1.2, they will only get 2 fortnights, so that will be 3,000 for those employees. So this lodgement will be a little bit more confusing than the confusing ones that we've already been lodging.
Yeah, and don't be silly like some people and think that just because someone started being employed on the 1st of July, you then have to back pay them July and August.
Correct.
All of them? No.
No, you don't do that. Also, maybe we're chatting a little bit too late, but yesterday was the deadline to make sure that you met the minimum $1,500 for those 2 fortnights. So if you haven't paid them $1,500 in each of those 2 fortnights, it's a bit late now.
And what are those? How important are those dates for those JobKeeper payments? I mean, how strict? What have you heard? How strict are the ATO being when it comes to? Well, hang on, you didn't pay them on time, therefore give us our money back. Is that happening?
I haven't heard that it is happening, but my advice would be if you have made a bit of a whoopsie, call the tax office and explain it. Call them before they call you. The penalties for getting it wrong are fairly severe. It could be 175% of what you've gotten from them. So if you've gotten $10,000, you'll have to pay $17,500 back, which would cripple any small business that's already doing it tough. So definitely call them. And explain what you've done and see what they say. They might ask you to pay it back. They might give you special consideration because you're attempting to do the right thing, but call them. Don't try and balls it out. That could end in tears.
If you've just joined us here on Small Biz Matters on Triple H 100.1 FM and across the Community Radio Network and on podcasts, we are talking to Nicole Lynch, who is actually a bit of a superstar of the bookkeeping world. She's a finalist in the Women in Finance Awards for this year. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
And we're talking all about JobKeeper 2.0, which is the reimagining, the continuation of the JobKeeper stimulus. And we're speaking all about the importance of understanding where all the dates fall. So the dates are quite important, as you mentioned a bit earlier. So it's important that you're paying people on time. But, I mean, I think we don't want people to be kept up at night. And I don't think the ATO does either. Why is it so important to call the ATO before they call you?
I guess admitting that you've made a mistake and offering to pay back if you're not entitled is much better than being pinged for trying to cheat the system. That's absolutely not cool. The tax office considers it fraud. You might consider it a whoopsie. They often don't look at it that way. So definitely call them. Get on the front foot. Don't wait till they hunt you down. That's likely to end in tears.
Yeah, indeed. And like all good things, if you're talking to the ATO and you get given some piece of advice or some information, get a reference number and the name of the person you talk to and possibly the location and write that all down somewhere in your notes and timestamp it and stamp it. Oh, that was my very loud computer. Yes, that is all very important when it comes to keeping on top of things and making sure they're aware. So we haven't heard anything about them clawing back anything yet, but, you know, these things can take time. And what sort of record keeping should you be keeping as well for all of this?
All of the records.
All the records.
You can't have too many. So when you first enrolled, it said, do you meet the decline in turnover test? And it was simply a tick box of yes or no, but it also said you need to keep proof of this. So you need to have reports that show what last year's sales were and what this year's sales were to prove that you were eligible. You didn't upload it to the tax office. You didn't have to provide it. But when they come around for an audit, and it probably is more of a when than an if, they are doing audits already. We're hearing that amongst our peers. You need to have the proof of why you thought you were eligible. And
what does that, what sort of a report do you mean? What is that report called?
Well, that report is called whatever you like to call it. I've made up some for my clients in the software that we prefer. So we generated a special report that has, say, for instance, April 2019 and April 2020 next to each other, and then we have a formula that gives the percent change. And then we have the 2 Mays next to each other with the formula, and so we have that set up. And so it will clearly say 32%, 40%, 60% downturn, and so we've got that proof. We've got the report. We've saved it in the system. We've downloaded PDF copies. We've got all of that to prove that we were eligible.
Excellent. Well done. And then there's also paperwork in relation to the relationship that you have with your employees, which is what it was actually quite a simple form. It was almost stunning in its simplicity, and where you had to declare that employees were eligible because they were connected with your business, right?
So as the business owner, you had to, if you thought you were eligible, you provided the form to your staff, and then they filled it out to accept your nomination. And they were welcome not to accept it. Some people might not have accepted it because it would have meant being paid more because the minimum was $1,500, and that might have affected their pension or something else. And so they were entitled to decline if they wanted to. But the form itself was fairly simple. It asked for your name, your date of birth. I think it asked for your tax file number. There was a section if you were 16 or 17 years old. A lot of older people accidentally filled that section out, maybe trying to reclaim lost youth. I don't know. I'm not going to guess why they felt they should fill that section out. And then right down the bottom it just said, I accept this nomination or something to that effect, and they ticked the box and then they signed and provided it back to the employer, and the employer needs to keep that on record as well. That the employee accepted the nomination, and you had to have that form before you went into the tax office and said, these are the employees that I'm declaring JobKeeper for. So I know this is a bit of a crystal ball question, but are we expecting more forms to be produced and expected to be filled out for 2.0, do you think? I don't think there'll be any new ones for staff. I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be the same form again, just saying that you accept to continue. With the actual date range in it? Yeah, but I'm imagining probably not. They'll just let you keep the same one, and I'm anticipating that you will still have to lodge your monthly reports. Maybe they'll change it to quarterly, but they'll probably want monthly because they're just collecting statistics here. We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters, listen to some community service announcements. When we come back, we're going to be speaking to Nicole Lynch from Streamline Management about DIYers and why it's not a great idea to try and unpack this legislation yourself. You're listening to Triple H. We'll be back after this.
The local government elections scheduled for September this year.
Who's coming up on the podcasts? So we're back in the room at the moment with Nicole Lynch, and we're talking all about JobKeeper 2.0 without actually talking about it because it hasn't been legislated yet. So everything we're saying you have to take with a grain of salt and just have a reimagine it. But who do we talk to when we're trying to figure out what is actually happening for us and our specific business? Absolutely speak to your tax and your BAS agent. If you have staff, your BAS agent might already be helping you run the payroll, and so they're well placed to help because they're already in there doing the wages, and they can make those changes or add the top-ups if it's needed. Mm-hmm. And tax agents can help as well, and maybe the two combined, depending if you've got really tricky circumstances, if you've bought another business, then your tax agent might be able to help there and hop in. But between the two of them, I'd definitely say that's a great way to go. Spending a little bit of money may well mean that you are entitled to JobKeeper. If you've done the testing yourself, you may think, I'm not eligible. But they might be able to find one of the alternate tests to prove that you are, or they might be able to put your mind at rest and say, you're absolutely not eligible, don't waste any more time on this. And really, it's because they've got a finger on the pulse of your business on a day-to-day basis. So this is actually a really great example of why you need good advisors that are qualified. Make sure you check out if they're part of a professional association, for example, if you're trying to find the right one. Now's a good time to engage with someone, but the good news is if you've already been speaking to and had the support of a BAS agent up until now, they're there. They've got all this legislation in the back of their head. They know what's going on with your business, and this is a great way to get help. Absolutely, and they have access to the associations that are feeding out the information, and also
I think BAS agents are quite active within their own community. They're supporting their peers, and so they've got that sounding board. If they're not quite sure what to do here, they can reach out to other BAS agents and they can discuss through and come to a good conclusion, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually, because there's so many resources around this and so much going on. So, Nicole, where can people find a good BAS agent such as yourself? Tell us about Streamline Management, where they can find you.
Well, we're based in Chatswood in the North Shore, and we specifically like to work with professional services. We're a professional service, so that's something that we have some knowledge around. But we also like to work with the trades and construction people. They call a spade, and you can just get down to work. You don't have to muck around. So they're really nice to work with as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for coming on today's program. It's been knowledgeable and interesting to find out. It's almost a historical thing now, isn't it? Since March, we've had all this happen, and it's great to unpack the history behind it. But it's important for businesses to understand as best as we can at the moment what's going on. And then we might check in with you a little bit later. We might get you to phone in once we've actually got it legislated, and we can give better, more specific, actually accurate advice. For specific advice, you should be going to your own BAS agent and bookkeeper. So thanks for coming on the program, Nicole.
Thanks for having me. It's been great fun.
Now, if you've missed any of today's program, you can, of course, catch up via podcast or iTunes or Spotify or wherever you ingest your small business education, where there's over 170 podcasts just like this one in all facets of learning for small business. My name has been Alexi Boyd. I look forward to speaking with you on another podcast and after the break.
Coronavirus has devastated the music.
And you're live in Triple H 100.1 FM. Welcome to Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd. Whether you're listening live on Triple H or via podcast, here's the show where you'll learn from experts, be inspired by journeys, and discover more about making your small business a success. The road to small business success is dotted with the pit stops of life. Previous experiences, major milestones in your career, successes, failures in a former working life, or maybe even the success of a failure of a former small business. But with each of these comes important life lessons that help to build the palette of colours that create your small business success. Some of those transitions are bigger leaps than the normal. Take, for example, today's guest, Eric Peck from Swoop Aero, who in a former life was an Australian Air Force pilot. How could you possibly take such a unique experience from around the world and utilise those skills to create a small business here in Australia? Well, that's exactly what Eric has done, and he's here to share it with us. Welcome to the program, Eric.
Thanks very much for having me, Alexi.
Well, it's great to have you on the program. Now, you're dialing in from Bris Vegas. Am I right? Is it Bris Vegas or are you in Melbourne?
No, I am. I'm in Melbourne with the cooler weather and slightly less warm sun, unfortunately.
Oh, that sucks. So you're in lockdown as well. That's ordinary for you, which must be a really unique experience for someone who has been all around the world, flown all around the world, and had that liberty and that freedom of being up in the air in your former life. Tell me a little bit about that former life, because it's it's so different from the norm from what we hear as previous small business experience.
Yeah, definitely. It is a little bit different, actually. I've been traveling quite a lot with work because we have a lot of our operations overseas, and so I think this has been one of the longest periods I've been in one city for quite a while now. And that kind of stems back all the way to the start of my career. So I grew up in Melbourne. I left school and joined the Air Force, and I trained to be an Air Force pilot. So I went to the military academy and I was accelerated through because originally we thought we were going to have lots of these new fighter planes, but F-35s, but they were a little bit late on their timeline. And so I got pushed through military training and then went through basic flying training, advanced flying training, and actually got selected to be a fighter pilot, which was really fun and really cool. But unfortunately, I got airsick when I was dogfighting, which means when you were chasing the other plane around the sky, I got motion sick, so just like car sick, but a bit worse. And so I wasn't very good at it.
No dogfighting for you.
I jumped from there across and No. It's I actually can't read a book in a car, so maybe I should have picked it up a little bit earlier. But that's how life is. And so then I went from I flew an aircraft called the Hercules, which is a tactical transport aircraft, so 4-engine aircraft, and often the face of humanitarian assistance when we see Australia supporting our regional neighbours. And I did a lot of that across Southeast Asia. I'm really lucky to be the first aircraft into Vanuatu after Cyclone Pam, supporting the humanitarian response there. A lot of disaster relief across the region, including in the Philippines, across Samoa and the Pacific Islands. and also did a couple of tours of the Middle East in Afghanistan and Iraq. But then somewhere during that time, I decided that actually I'd like to learn a bit more about business. And so I went back to university part-time while I was working and finished up a master's degree and then jumped out of the Air Force and into management consulting, which is my first foray into the business world.
So you've gone, I guess you're taking the best from both worlds, aren't you? Because what's some of the real positives that you're bringing with you from that military culture that you can apply to small business?
I think a really commonality between the way a small business operates and the way the military operates is just a very fluid, often unpredictable set of things that are going on. You know, when you're running a small business, whether you've got, you're working on your own and running a business, or you've got 5 people or 10 people working for you or 50 people working for you, just unlike a big company where you have a big corporate structure that's supporting everything you're doing and day-to-day decisions can be made, very methodically and often very slowly. In a small business, I think it's just quite dynamic as you're growing and you're facing challenges, and generally you have far less resources, both in terms of your time and the money that you can spend and the staff you've got to support you doing your job. And so I think that the big takeaway or the big benefit of coming from that military environment, and particularly flying aircraft, was that you had to learn to be able to very rapidly take information, use a structure to quickly make a decision based on the information you had. Not be too concerned it might be the wrong decision, because you can make another decision and change it down the track, and just dynamically respond to what you're seeing in front of you. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, is that it can be a very dynamic environment, but having the structures in place around you to give you a bit of a skeleton or a framework to make your decisions off and to run your day-to-day activities can really help you survive and thrive in that dynamic, changing environment of a small business.
It's so true, isn't it? Because we are so agile and nimble, and I think that agility and that nimbility, if I've just made that word up, is what you've got when you're a fighter pilot, because you've got to make those split-second decisions, and you've got, like you said, the framework of the machine around you, which I guess could be the example of a small business framework around you, but you are the one who's responsible, and you're the one making the decisions, and you're the one who's responsible and living those decisions later on. So I'm really keen to hear about Swoop Aero. Tell me a little bit about it, but importantly, tell me about the mindset that you need to have as a for-profit business in the not-for-profit world.
Yeah, definitely. So I founded Swoop Aero with my business partner, Josh Tepper, in 2017. And we founded it to transform the way the world moves essential supplies by making access to the air seamless. And Josh was a robotics engineer. So if you can imagine big arms building Teslas on production lines, he was the guy that could code those. And we kind of got together and we got asked this question around, could chemotherapy medication be moved using a drone in regional Australia in the country? And we kind of went, well, yeah, the answer is yes, and looked around and actually saw that transport and logistics was this big challenge, and there was an opportunity to use technology to solve it. And so that's what we set out to do. And the problem, or the part of the world where this challenge is most obvious, is in the emerging world, where the road infrastructure and the supporting services aren't as good as, say, Melbourne or Sydney. And so we quickly identified that we both wanted to build a business that used technology and that was kind of, on the leading edge of technology, but we didn't want to just be, selling products online. We wanted to be doing something that had genuine impact in the world. And so we decided the best way to do that was to build a for-profit business that was very, very, had a focus and a CSR principle on having impact or positive impact in the world and everything we do, which has been a very unique challenge at times. We've gone through we work alongside some of the biggest NGOs in the world, such as UNICEF or UKAID and USAID, and they are great examples of big, heavy machines with multiple layers of management and often are requiring, quite a lot of management to interact with them. And we work alongside them to deploy, we're effectively flying robots into emerging countries to help their supply chain and make sure that there's medical supplies on the shelves. And so that's quite an interesting challenge around how do you balance the need for profit, because ultimately business is built on profit, or building a sustainable business requires return on investment, and we have got investment, so we need to generate that. But how do you balance that with delivering positive social outcomes? And I think the way we've gone about that is that if we really just focus on genuine value creation, ultimately, or from a strategic sense, that will deliver the return on investment in the long run. And so sometimes that can be hard when you're only looking a couple of months ahead and you've only got a small team and you're all working really hard. And it's hard to get that, you're not getting that immediate positive reinforcement. You're not getting that immediate feedback on what you're doing. But by focusing on real value add in the social context, and for us, that means that, we know that if we set up a series of flight routes in a healthcare system and we know that it's increasing the stock that's on the shelves, people are getting better access to healthcare. At the start, that can be hard because it's difficult to deploy and you're not seeing a big return straight away. It's not an easy sell. It's not you're not a high markup or anything like that. But that as long as you're genuinely adding value, and we can measure that value add by both quantitative, so we can look at the reduction in things like pathology turnaround times from weeks into days. We can look at the amount of stock outs on the shelves in the healthcare centres, and we can measure that with qualitative data about how people perceive the service being deployed and how they, their value add of actually of the value that they get personally and socially and the impact on their livelihood from that existing. And if we can determine that we are adding value, then we stay the course. And as long as we remain really focused on that value add in the fullness of time, and ultimately we will create that value at the end, and that's when we'll be able to get the return on investment. And so it's more about playing the long game, which can be harder, but generating that genuine value out at the end.
Well, I was going to ask you about that sustainability question, because obviously you've got a huge amount of capital that you need to inject at the beginning. You're talking about robotics, you're talking about drones. Obviously, if you lose a product or you lose a drone, then that's going to be quite a high output for you. Does that become part of your business plan long term, that understanding that you've got a lot of capital injection at the beginning?
Yeah, it definitely does. And it depends on the capital injection at the beginning is to effectively build the technology and establish the position within the market from which we can grow on and have a lower cost of scaling. And I think really understanding, just like anyone who wants to start a business, the first thing you do is you make a business plan, and it's less about, there's a military quote, I think it's all good plans go to waste on first contact with the enemy, or words to that effect. It's by a general somewhere. I'm not going to quote who it is because I'm not quite sure actually, but basically you make a business plan so that you understand exactly what you're doing and the market you're getting into. And it's the same about whether you're talking about, putting robots into an emerging country or you're opening up a capo or you want to start a logistics business. It's all the same. It's about building those, understanding all the fundamentals around what that business could look like and having a plan how to move it forward. And one of the key things for us we worked out very early on is that cost of buying a drone in the market was far too high for this to be sustainable, both from an economic standpoint and both from the technology to be actually employed in these emerging markets where it can have a lot of impact, or in Australia where, you need to be able to generate efficiencies from the application of the technology. And so from day one, our biggest consideration was that we worked out the physical assets themselves, our small autonomous aeroplanes, had to be about a seventh of the cost of what we could buy one for. And so right at the beginning, we had to set out to build one that was very affordable and very supportable in the field so that we could put lots and lots of these different bits of technology out there without the huge capital costs associated with doing that. And that's where a lot of our upfront investment has gone into making sure that we keep our cost base really low so we can grow the business sustainably moving forward.
If you've just joined us here on Triple H and across the Community Radio Network and on podcast, you're listening to Eric Peck, who is the founder of Swoop Aero. And we're speaking all about that transition between that, working in the military for all those years into small business, but importantly, the hurdles that you face when you're working in the logistics industry. Now, you're not only working in logistics, you're working in robotics, logistics, and also across national borders and into third world countries. What's your biggest hurdle at the moment now that you're up and running? What do you find is the biggest difficulty you face to continue running the business?
I think from our perspective, it's very easy, particularly when you're talking drones or aeroplanes, to say regulation. And I think regulation exists, particularly in aviation and healthcare, for a very important reason. It's so that both of those industries are very safe. And you know that when you're getting in an aeroplane, or that when you get a prescription from a pharmacy, that what you're getting is really, really safe. So that's incredibly important. And the biggest challenge we face is not the fact that exists, but at the moment we operate in, we have small teams doing things in 5 different countries, and it means that's 5 different sets of regulation, all with their variances, all with differences. And that can be quite challenging at times, particularly for a small team. And the way we've really gone about that is we identified very early on that, if you look at Qantas as a good example of an airline, it has a very good reputation for being safe. And we identified that safety from an aviation standpoint, and then honesty and transparency as a corporate entity were the 2 most important things that we should be building our reputation on, and making sure that everyone understands that they're, 2 of our central most values. And by putting those together, we've been able to work quite constructively across multiple jurisdictions with multiple regulation sets, because when people talk to us, they know that we have this big focus on safety, which means we can be trusted with the aeroplanes and we can trust that we carry the medical supplies, but also that we're hyper transparent and hyper honest in how we operate. And what that means for us is that we're able to generate a word of mouth or a referral system where different countries will actually, and we encourage them to talk to each other, and they know that actually this is a really honest company. They're going to be transparent. They're going to tell the truth. And that enables us to tackle, those challenges of different regulations, different rules, different laws in different countries with a smaller and nimbler team ultimately. I think they're probably our 2 most important values.
We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters on Triple H. And when we come back after the break, we're going to be speaking a little bit more with Eric from Swoop Aero about his journey and where he sees, the aviation industry and drone technology moving forward. You're listening to Triple H. We'll be back after this.
Latest edition of the Hills to Hawkesbury Tree.
Authorised by the Chief Medical Officer, Canberra.
Welcome back to Triple H 100.1 FM. If you've missed any of today's podcast, you can, of course, catch up via iTunes or Spotify or wherever you ingest your small business education, because there are over 170 podcasts to listen to and to gain a huge amount of information. Now, today we're speaking to Eric from Swoop Aero, which is a up-and-coming, no one say up-and-coming because you've been around for a few years now, Eric, who's taken his valuable training in the Australian Air Force and taken all of that military understanding and honed it to be quite a successful international small business. So you work, obviously, as you were mentioning before the break, with drone technology to deliver medical supplies in a variety of countries. The scalability is enormous. You can go into more and more countries, and obviously, as people become more aware and understanding and accepting of drone technology, the opportunity becomes endless. What would you say to someone who's starting a small business in this industry as to the best pathway to get in? Because it must be brand new and shiny and very different from what a lot of small businesses experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the best things about growing up in Australia is that we have a fantastic education system across the tertiary education system or the university education system, which is really upskilling people to be able to function in these kind of the new and upcoming technology sector, but also things like the ability of online courseware and self-learning creates an opportunity for almost anyone to build the skill sets they need to get into this area and be able to create a business and move forward with it, which is really exciting. And so if people who are looking at actually making a move and wanting to start a technology business, I think at the moment we're seeing a bit of turmoil and a bit of disruption in the world, quite obviously. And what I think we're going to see is an increased focus on social impact moving forward. And people and investors in particular who are going to want to be backing, up and coming and new businesses as they start, want to be able to see not only that, we're going to see some pure financial return, but they're increasingly going to want to see what are the social impacts of my investment going to be? How's it going to be helping people locally or nationally or internationally, depending on what kind of business, or hyper locally or hyper globally, depending on what you're trying to do. And I think people who want to get into this space, being able to, build up the skill set they need from whether that's university or online learning or coming out of school, and then pairing that with being able to identify how their business is going to genuinely create social benefits or positive impact for people. And I think that'll be the key to actually, working in the technology sector in the next 5 to 10 years.
So do you believe that if anybody's out there with a startup in mind in this sector, you have to make that part of your business plan?
I would definitely agree, and I think that's a big focus of something I truly believe in, that, is increasingly now, and, probably, we've all heard about corporate social responsibility and triple bottom line reporting, but, over the next 5 or so years, I think we're going to see that as you're building your business plan and when you want to go, it is really important. It's an intrinsic part of that business to see that, what is the impact you're going to create with the business and how's it going to add value to people day to day.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an important factor with small business as well. And so, Eric, when it comes to being part of a team, how do you behave differently when you've got teams scattered all over the world?
That's a really good question. I think one of my favourite things to talk about occasionally is that I've experienced a couple of different cultures. I've experienced the military aviation culture, which is very, very safety focused, but also, a large group of people are very, very driven towards, the common goal of ultimately the common goal of that group is to support Australia. And then to move into the corporate sector where there wasn't such, there was a different type of culture, again, very positive, both in a small business. The best consultancy I worked for, I was the third employee. And then I worked in a big business. I worked in Deloitte. And I think both of those had very good corporate cultures and very, very inclusive and very, very focused on diversity of thought. And what I have tried to do in creating Swoop is to combine those two to be able to create a very team-centric focused culture, but also to bring in that diversity of thought and build a diverse team from day one and encourage different opinions and different points of view, whether that's from upbringing or whether that's from education or from whatever it is, and making people feel comfortable to be able to talk about that openly in an environment so you can get the best decisions possible. And, whether that's you talking to 5 or 6 friends because you're the only person working in your business at the moment and you surrounding yourself with different people who've got different ideas to help you come to the best decision, or whether you've got a team around you or a team that works for you or a team that's around you or alongside you that's helping you run the business. I think that combining that ability to keep people driven towards, that common goal and where you've got some impact, that's a really good goal to focus on. It's how can we have impact with what we're doing and keeping everyone running towards that, but at the same time enabling them to feel comfortable to speak out and share their opinion openly from a vast array of different backgrounds so that we can ultimately get the most input into that decision and make the best one you can.
Look, it's a fantastic way to wrap up today's program. Thank you for sharing with us your journey, your experience, and also what you expect to happen in your industry moving forward. Eric, where can people find out a little bit more about Swoop Aero and what you do?
Definitely. If you head on the internet, you can go to swoopaero.com or feel free to reach out directly on contact@swoop.aero, and we'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story on Small Biz Matters. It's been really interesting to hear that background and to see how you've emerged into new technologies and taken all of that experience and created a small business out of it. I think there's lots for us to learn. If you've missed any of today's program, you can catch up via podcasts on smallbizmatters.com.au or iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your small business education. My name has been Alexi Boyd. We'll be back after this.